NATO has suggested they should establish a military presence in Bulgaria following Russia's troop buildup near the border with Ukraine. But Bulgarian Defense Minister said his country does not see a need for deployment of NATO troops on its territory. Some analysts argue that Bulgaria is afraid of Russia. Todd Wolters, the head of the European Command of the U.S. Armed Forces, said NATO should strengthen the eastern flank of the alliance by expanding the presence of allied forces in the framework of the Enhanced Forward Presence mission. This was discussed during a closed video conference of Wolters with the military chiefs of NATO partner countries. Wolters said NATO should create its own enhanced forward presence contingents of around 1,500 people in Romania and Bulgaria. In Poland and the Baltic states, these alliance units have been training alongside local troops since 2017. However, in the event of an emergency, they will act as a kind of forward command or foothold for further strengthening the North Atlantic bloc. Wolters stressed that expanding the mission to NATO's southeastern flank would not be a provocation. Rather, the increased troop presence will provide consolation to partner countries. In addition, NATO will continue to adhere to the so-called NATO-Russia Act, which prohibits the permanent deployment of large forces on the eastern flank. For this reason, the troops are not permanently deployed in the Baltic states, but change from time to time. From the point of view of the proponents of the idea, the expansion of the Enhanced Forward Presence mission would be a suitable signal in response to the deployment of Russian troops on the border with Ukraine. The arrival of new troops in Bulgaria and Romania could make it clear to Russia that the alliance will not just watch its president deploy up to 100,000 soldiers with heavy equipment and modern missile systems in the center of Europe. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO would constantly assess the need to further adjust their posture, also in the southeast of the region, because they need to be sure that they can always protect and defend allies against any threat. Russia's military buildup near Ukraine has increased tensions between Moscow and NATO, and the alliance has urged Russia not to invade the former Soviet Republic. Russia denies planning an invasion, and it says it is responding to what it sees as threats to its own security from Ukraine's increasingly close relations with NATO and aspirations to join the alliance. Moscow said it wanted a legally binding guarantee from NATO that it will give up any military activity in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Therefore, NATO called Bulgaria to host troops on its territory against Russia. But Bulgarian Defense Minister said his country does not see a need for deployment of NATO troops on its territory. Stefan Yanov confirmed reports that within NATO different response options, including establishing a military alliance presence in Black Sea, NATO members Bulgaria and Romania under its Enhanced Forward Presence mission, are being discussed. NATO has used that mission to deploy military forces to the Baltic states and eastern Poland. Yanov said, "My position is that such a debate has the potential to lead to an undesirable increase of tensions in the region." He said that for the time being there was no reason to consider Russia's troop buildup as a direct threat to the alliance and the relevant security zone. He said, "In this sense, I do not believe that there are the necessary circumstances that can justify a decision related to the deployment of additional troops on our territory." He emphasized that Bulgaria, which joined NATO in 2004, will be following the situation closely, and was standing ready to increase the capacity of its own national forces in the context of the Allied capabilities to deter and defend if needed. Mikhail Nadanov wrote that Bulgaria has consistently been a target of the Kremlin's hybrid warfare as a NATO and EU member. Moscow is pursuing a calculated and well-planned policy aimed at influencing domestic politics in Bulgaria, with a view of preventing the country from becoming a robust NATO regional security provider. This is especially important for the build-up of the alliance's presence in the Black Sea. Bulgaria's defense system has long been subverted by Russia. Just recently, Bulgarian prosecutors announced charges of 6 Bulgarians on suspicion of spying for Russia. 5 of the accused are senior or former defense officials. This is the latest example of Moscow's persistent efforts to use Bulgaria as a channel for obtaining classified NATO information. Of particular interest to the Russian intelligence services are rearmament projects in Bulgaria, including the purchase of US F-16 Block 70 fighters and the recently inaugurated NATO Maritime Coordination Center in Varna. 8 Russian diplomats have been expelled from Bulgaria since late 2019. But espionage is only the tip of the iceberg, with strong efforts to influence political decisions playing out below the surface. Bulgaria's track record in building up its capacity to counter hybrid threats can be improved. As NATO outlines, it is the primary responsibility of the targeted nation to respond to hybrid attacks. Bulgaria has already undertaken initial steps to develop this capacity. In 2018, Sofia updated its national security strategy of 2011 to include hybrid threats and to deliver a realistic security environment assessment, in particular regarding Black Sea challenges. The government also updated its national defense strategy in 2016 to equip its defense organization to meet hybrid warfare challenges. In early 2021, following a 2-year strategic defense review, Bulgaria adopted a new Armed Forces Development Program 2032, which focuses on capability building to strengthen potential of defense in the context of the NATO Article 5 collective defense. Furthermore, under this document, it is envisaged the Ministry of Defense will develop its capacity to counter hybrid threats, serving as an integral part of the national security system. These steps have been important and timely, but they fall short given the complexity of evolving security challenges and, above all, Russia's revanchist agenda in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, challenges from an increasingly assertive China, such as the use of economic activities to further Beijing's foreign policy priorities, including debt dependencies, must also be considered. In November 2020, Bulgaria finally signed a contract with Lursen Group to build 2 multi-purpose modular patrol vessels that would participate in a broad range of NATO and EU-led operations. The implementation of this project will help the Bulgarian Navy acquire modern capabilities for surface warfare, submarine warfare, and air warfare. However, a joint NATO maritime capability in the region is still badly needed, and the potential for building naval capability under the alliance is yet to be fully exploited. In 2016, former Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov said the country would not join a proposed NATO fleet meant to counter Russian influence in the Black Sea, a day after Moscow warned against any such buildup. His reaction was due allegedly to Russian pressure and for all NATO regional allies, resulting in abandoning a promising and much-needed initiative. Nonetheless, the recently established center in Varna is an encouraging achievement in the build-up of a stronger NATO presence. Through this structure, Bulgaria will provide a maritime coordination function to support NATO's tailored forward presence. The center will also support maritime domain awareness. With these steps and initiatives, Bulgaria is on the path to becoming more resilient to Russian hybrid activity and a more militarily capable NATO member. But significant and sustained defense policy efforts are needed to develop the right defense capabilities to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Bulgaria is still a largely untapped reserve of opportunities regarding the buildup of the NATO deterrence and defense potential in the region. To what extent these opportunities can be seized upon depends on continued and consistent political support from Bulgaria's ruling parties, as well as on NATO's and primarily America's commitment to strengthening the alliance's Black Sea flank. This is time to share your opinion. Should Bulgaria help NATO to contain Russia?